very many of us today. I should double check. Your name is?
Josh.
Josh. And your name is? Uavella. So, if it's just the three of us, one of the things I wanted to go back over, I was actually hoping Nick would be here. He might get here any minute, but in any case, 2 classes ago, when we were talking about John Locke and rights, I said that illegal aliens didn't have any rights. Well, if you're in the mindset of that time period, there wasn't even a concept of an alien. Anyone could come. I'm not sure exactly how you became a voter, actually. It'd be interesting to find out. But basically, it was open borders, and all kinds of people were coming. It wasn't easy to get to. Nor was it really that attractive to a lot of people. In fact, the kind of the funniest thing, when you look back on it, was that the British thought of the colonies as a backwater. Well, it was, and they even thought of it as kind of tropical, because the southern states pretty much still are actually, in a lot of ways. But so the idea of coming to the colonies was not something that most people look forward to. If they were educated and well off, they wanted to stay where it was nicer, civilized. You could die coming to the colonies. One of the funniest things, there's an opera by Puccini, where at the end of the opera, the soprano and the tenor get exiled from France, and they come to New Orleans, and they arrive in New Orleans, and it's a desert, and they die in the desert. And that's totally not what New Orleans is. It's just not a desert at all. It's actually mostly underwater today. So that's kind of funny. A Puccini opera. And people didn't know that New Orleans is not a desert. But in going to ye old ChatGPT to check on the status of aliens and so on, I discovered that, of course, over the years, there are all kinds of cases and so on where the actual idea of illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants actually become known as that. And that's mostly because at a certain point, the people in government wanted to cut down on people coming into the country and becoming citizens from places they didn't like. And apparently the first group of immigrants that they targeted were Chinese women. This is just, this is ChatGPT, so, if you want to check it and see what real history might tell us. But the idea that Chinese women, which I believe, if I remember correctly, didn't come from this, but that there were Chinese laborers that were used to build the western portion of the railroad. And it's not, the typical way of a person to live, just in male, gatherings. So Chinese women were coming as well, and people, for some reason, in government didn't want that, and so they they kind of made them illegal to come. I don't know how that works, so before 1875, we had open borders, so there was no concept of an illegal alien. But then you had restricted immigration starting in 1875, such as Chinese women were considered undesirable. While not directly related to the modern concept of illegal aliens, this is ChatGPT, so you can check it. Then it became, a few years later, the Chinese Exclusion Act, which I remember reading that some people from China went to Mexico first and then came into the United States as Mexicans because people couldn't tell the difference. And so that was one way to get into the United States. 1891, you can see the Immigration Act. 1920. By the way, at least one historian friend of mine kind of went right along with this and agreed with all of these. So ChatGPT might be a little bit untrustworthy, but for the most part, it does seem to gather its information from good sources, at least so far. 1952, so this is a year after I was born. They consolidated previous immigration laws, etc. The reason I'm bringing this up is because 2 classes ago, when we were talking about rights, I said that illegal aliens didn't have any rights. And it's actually much more complex than that. And actually, they do actually have significant rights as a result of changes in court decisions, etc. So there are rights that individuals have. So I wanted to correct that because I made a mistake when I said that there weren't any. And then there was a second error that I made last class, but I can't remember what it was. But I remember I wanted to apologize for that mistake too. Now I can't remember what it was. Anybody remember what it was? Did I say something really stupid last class? Well, I mean, probably every class I say at least something stupid. However, part of what it could have been was the issue of the monadology and substance and things of that sort. You can see the history of my previous 7 days checking. I'm just really becoming a fan of ChatGPT, obviously. It's such a saving of work, really, Why go look up, specific things on your own or read whole articles on your own looking for a specific thing when you could just... Actually, I think Google does this by itself now, right? So Google's search is now an AI as well, so that's been amazing. However, I did check, what does the internet think about my idea that both Leibniz and Berkeley are basically comparing matter and spirit to what we consider today to be mass and energy. And I got an interesting response. I'm not sure that I agree completely with ChatGPT on that. In this particular one, part of it was that Leibniz's monadology was a critique of John Locke. Well, he never mentions John Locke in particular, but the idea of the materialist position is clearly part of what he's critiquing in his monadology. So that's all good. And what do they mean by substance? It's very confusing, actually, because if you think everything is the mind of God, but if the way I interpret that, it's really energy and an arrangement, and he's calling that God, that's kind of that's out there. So officially, if you're going to take the graduate record exam in philosophy, you know, the official word is closer to what ChatGPT says here, that Berkeley especially is an idealist, and idealism is, you know, that, you know, everything is ideas, and well, we'll talk more. There's Nick. You just missed my apology for telling you you were wrong for what you said about that illegal aliens have rights. Just totally missed it. But that's all right. You could go back and look. I pointed out that I had to ask ye old ChatGPT about that, and it corrected me as far as, you know, when illegal aliens became a phrase, and certain cases and so on, where certain rights, etc. And, you know, something I never mentioned when I was talking about Locke, and I usually do, is the UN, because Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the spouse of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had died at that point, but she was selected to run the United Nations Committee on deciding about rights, worldwide rights, at least for all the signatories of the UN Charter. And so there's an official document declaring human rights for everybody on the earth, according to the UN. So that's another aspect of that. And the signatories, including the US, are supposed to be obligated to that. But China is also a signatory to the UN Charter, and their disagreements on the nature of rights is just absolutely complete. They think it's all nonsense. And their answer essentially is that, yes, we are in agreement with the total position on rights. It's just that we interpret what rights are completely differently. So we're actually in agreement with it. You know, we shouldn't be thrown out of the UN because we don't obey the charter, and yet at the same time. And by the way, the easiest way to look that up is to just go. The UN has a really nice webpage. They don't have any real force anywhere, but they have a nice webpage. I think it's called a Declaration of Human Rights. And notice that you know, it's kind of written almost on the same pattern as the original Declaration of Rights, you know, of the United States, the declaration that we sent to King George, who laughed at us. Who are they? Who are all these people? You know, John Hancock. Sorry. Remember, he was crazy. But you know, so it follows the same kind of overall pattern. In some respects, anyway. So there's that. So people are supposed to have rights. Notice that there's plenty of places where that's not really followed, even by countries that are supposed to be members of the UN. And you can come up with all kinds of excuses. There was a guy in that building, and we had to blow up the whole building to kill that guy. So, you know, it's not our fault that he was hiding among all those civilians. Can you say stuff like that and like laugh at it still? Or is that just absolutely inhumane? Remember, I have an Irish sense of humor. So I don't know if that's a good excuse. But yes, you could go there. So that was one mistake I made in class 2 classes ago. So I think I emailed everyone an apology for that too. And I might have emailed, you know, the ChatGPT thing or something to try to make sure. Oh no, I hate it when I say something that's wrong. Although if it's like 25 years ago, There's no way for me to fix that, you know. So that has happened, where I find out something, and 25 years earlier I had said just the opposite, and I'm like, really, I can't fix that. Okay, but last class we were talking about the best of all possible worlds. I played what I think is the most comical and fascinating aria from Candide, American Candide, the version that Leonard Bernstein wrote, musical. Candide was actually a play. Voltaire's work is a play, and that's, I don't remember exactly how much there is I mean, an opera or operetta or musical is not really the same as a play, of course. In the same way a movie is not really the same as a book, in different formats, etc., so they can't be the same. But Voltaire's making fun of Leibniz's argument that this is the best of all possible worlds, which he argues, that's the syllabus, right? Supposedly today we're talking about Berkeley, idealism, etc., and we will. But the point that I wanted to finish making, when Voltaire made fun of Dr. Pangloss, Leibniz, for saying that this is the best of all possible worlds, what I think Leibniz was